Rain fell like judgment on the city that night, heavy and cold, soaking the streets, until every neon reflection looked like a wound, bleeding color. Adrian Cross stepped out of his black luxury car, the door closing behind him with a soft thud that sounded louder than the thunder above. To the world, Adrian Cross was untouchable, a billionaire investor, a man whose name moved markets and crushed competitors with a single phone call. But tonight, for the first time in years, he felt oddly exposed. His tailored coat shielded him from the rain, yet not from the emptiness that had followed him everywhere. Since the accident, since the house went quiet, since money stopped fixing what was broken, he adjusted his cufflinks and walked toward the restaurant entrance when suddenly a small force slammed into his side, nearly knocking him off balance. Before he could react, he felt his wallet gone. He turned just in time to see a thin girl darting away, barefoot, her dark hair plastered to her face, clutching something tightly to her chest. "Hey!" Adrian shouted, instinctively giving chase, his expensive shoes splashing through puddles as passersby stared in confusion. The girl ran like she had been running her whole life, weaving through alleys, jumping over trash bags, slipping through spaces no adult man should be able to follow, yet something inside Adrian refused to stop. This wasn't about the money. He carried more in his watch than in that wallet. It was about her. There was desperation in the way she ran, not greed. His lungs burned as he followed her deeper into the city's forgotten veins, past boarding, up shops and flickering streetlights, until finally she vanished behind a rusted gate. Adrian slowed, heart pounding, rain dripping from his hair, and pushed the gate open. Inside was a narrow passage that led to an abandoned subway entrance, long closed to the public. The air smelled of mold and old metal. "I won't call the police," Adrian said loudly, surprising himself with the calm in his voice. Silence answered him. He stepped forward, then froze. At the bottom of the stairs, illuminated by a single flickering bulb, the girl stood trembling, holding his wallet like it was both treasure and curse. She couldn't have been more than 13. Her clothes were torn, too big in places, too small in others. Her arm, marked with bruises that told stories no child should have to live. Her eyes met his, not defiant, not cruel, but terrified. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I just needed it." Adrian felt something crack inside his chest. He had expected anger, maybe arrogance. Not this. "Needed what?" he asked softly. She shook her head, backing away. "I didn't take the money, I swear." She opened the wallet with shaking fingers and pulled out only one thing, an old, worn photograph tucked behind the cards. Adrian's breath caught. It was the photo he carried everywhere, his daughter Lily, smiling, missing her front teeth, sunlight in her eyes. "Why did you take that?" he whispered, his voice suddenly unsteady. Tears streamed down the girl's face. "Because she looks like my sister," she said. The words hit him harder than any punch ever could. For a moment, the world went silent except for the rain above. "Where is your sister?" Adrian asked. The girl hesitated, then turned and started walking deeper into the abandoned station. "Come," she said quietly, "I'll show you." Every instinct screamed at Adrian to stop, to turn back, but his feet moved on their own. The stairs descended into darkness, each step pulling him further from the man he thought he was. The tunnel opened into a wide underground space where makeshift shelter lined the walls, cardboard, old blankets, broken furniture. Fires burned in metal drums, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. People looked up as Adrian passed, their eyes hollow, wary. This was a world beneath his world, one he had funded indirectly, ignored directly, and never truly seen. The girl stopped in front of a small, collapsed corner shielded by plastic sheets. She knelt, pulling the sheets aside. "Maya," she whispered, "I brought someone." Adrian stepped closer, his heart pounding louder than the thunder above. On the ground lay a small girl, no older than it, her body thin, her breathing shallow. Her face, God help him, was almost identical to Lily's. Same nose, same curve of the lips. The resemblance was so strong, it made his knees weak. "She's sick," the girl said, her voice cracking. "She hasn't eaten in 2 days. I thought, maybe your wallet had money for food or a doctor." Adrian knelt without thinking, his expensive coat pooling on the filthy ground as he gently touched Maya's forehead. Burning hot, fever, neglect, fear wrapped around his heart like a vise. In that moment, the city, the money, the board meetings, all of it vanished. There was only this child, this place, this unbearable truth. "What's your name?" Adrian asked the older girl. "Sarah," she replied. "My parents died. We ran. No one helped." Adrian swallowed hard, guilt rising like bile. How many times had he driven past people like this? Windows tinted, life muted. How many chances had he ignored? He stood slowly, pulling out his phone. "I'm getting her help," he said. Sarah's eyes widened with fear. "No police," she pleaded. "They'll take her away." Adrian met her gaze, his voice firm but gentle. "I promise I won't let anyone hurt her." Sirens echoed in the distance, not police, but an ambulance he had called with a single word. As they waited, Adrian wrapped his coat around Maya, holding her small hand in his, feeling how fragile life could be. When the paramedics arrived, the underground world watched in stunned silence as the billionaire carried the homeless child in his arms, water dripping from his hair, tears mixing with rain. As they emerged into the city lights, something inside Adrian broke completely and something else was born. He looked at Sarah, standing alone at the tunnel entrance, fear etched into her young face. "You're coming too," he said. She hesitated. "Why?" Adrian answered honestly. "Because tonight you didn't steal my wallet," he said. "You stole my heart." And as the ambulance doors closed, the rain finally began to slow, as if the city itself was holding its breath, unaware that a single act of desperation had just set into motion a chain of events that would expose a wound so deep it would shatter a billionaire's world forever. If this chapter moved you, don't forget to subscribe, because what Adrian discovers next will change everything you think you know about kindness, loss, and the true cost of turning away the hospital light. We're too white, too clean, and far too bright for a place meant to heal. And as Adrian Cross stood in the emergency corridor watching doctors rush Maya through swinging doors, he felt smaller than he had in decades, a man stripped of titles and power, reduced to a silent witness clutching a rain-soaked coat and a trembling promise. Sarah hovered beside him, barefoot on the polished floor, her thin arms wrapped around herself as if she might disappear if she let go. Her eyes tracking every movement with the sharp vigilance of someone who had learned early that survival meant never relaxing. Adrian tried to speak, tried to reassure her, but words failed him. How do you comfort a child whose life has been a series of broken assurances, minutes stretched into hours, the ticking clock pounding in his ears louder than any boardroom ultimatum ever had? And memories he had buried under layers of success clawed their way back. Lily, in a hospital bed years ago, wires and monitors beeping like a countdown, his wife Elena gripping his hand so tightly her nails cut skin, the doctor's face already apologizing before his mouth opened. Adrian squeezed his eyes shut, forcing the image away, but it lingered, overlapping with Maya's fragile body being wheeled away, history threatening to repeat itself. A nurse approached, her expression cautious but kind, asking routine questions that felt anything but routine. Names, ages, insurance, and Adrian answered without hesitation, signing forms with a flourish that had authorized billion-dollar deals, yet now trembled slightly on paper. When the nurse asked about guardianship, he paused, glancing at Sarah, whose gaze instantly dropped to the floor, fear tightening her shoulders. "I am," Adrian said finally, the word surprising even himself. "I'm responsible." Something shifted then, unseen but irreversible, like a door closing behind him. They were guided to a waiting room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee, where families clutched hope in paper cups and whispered prayers under fluorescent lights. Sarah sat rigidly on the edge of a chair, as if afraid to take up space, and Adrian gently draped a blanket around her shoulders, the hospital logo stark against her worn clothes. "She's strong," he said quietly, unsure who he was trying to convince. "She has to be," Sarah replied, her voice flat with exhaustion. "I can't lose her too." The raw honesty in her words struck Adrian deeper than anger ever could, and he realized then that Sarah did not see the world as cruel. She saw it as unreliable, a place where love came with an expiration date. Time crawled, interrupted only by announcements and footsteps, until finally a doctor emerged, his face serious but not grim. And Adrian stood so quickly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. The doctor explained Maya's condition: severe malnutrition, untreated infection, fever dangerously high but stabilizing now that treatment had begun. And as the words flowed, Adrian felt equal parts relief and rage, relief that she might live, rage that she had been allowed to suffer so long unseen. "She'll need time," the doctor concluded, "and a safe place to recover." Adrian nodded, his jaw set. "She'll have one." The doctor studied him briefly, perhaps recognizing the resolve that money could not buy, and moved on. Sarah exhaled shakily, tears finally spilling down her cheeks, and Adrian knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes. "You did the bravest thing," he said. "You kept her alive." She shook her head. "I stole," she whispered. Adrian shook his own head gently. "You saved," he corrected. "There's a difference." When they were finally allowed to see Maya, the room was dimmer, the machines quieter, and Adrian approached the bed slowly, his breath hitching as he saw her sleeping, small chest rising and falling steadily now. The resemblance to Lily was even more painful up close, a mirror reflecting a life that might have been, and Adrian's vision blurred as he brushed a strand of hair from Maya's forehead. Sarah stood back unsure until Adrian beckoned her closer. "She's still here," he whispered. Because of you. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for Maya's, and in that fragile connection, Adrian saw a bond forged not by comfort, but by shared hardship, stronger than most families he knew. Hours later, after arrangements were made and private rooms secured with a single phone call, Adrian insisted Sarah eat, watch quietly as she devoured food with a mixture of hunger and guilt, as if waiting to be punished for wanting more. You don't have to rush, he said gently. There will be more. She paused, studying him with a seriousness far beyond her years. People always say that, she replied. Then they leave. The words pierced him. I won't, Adrian said, the promise heavy and dangerous. As night deepened outside the hospital windows, Adrian stepped away briefly to take a call from his assistant, the world of meetings and market intruding like a rude awakening. But for the first time, he dismissed it without explanation, hanging up before she could protest. Returning to the room, he found Sarah asleep in a chair, curled protectively toward Maya's bed, and something inside him softened completely. He sat nearby, watching over them, a silent guardian haunted by the knowledge that this sterile room was the same setting where he had lost everything once before. Memories flooded him again, unbidden. The night Lily's monitor flatlined. The way Elena's scream had torn through him the months after, when the house echoed with absence, when Elena drifted away emotionally before leaving physically, unable to live among reminders. Adrian had buried himself in work then, building an empire on the foundation of grief, convincing himself that productivity was survival. Now, surrounded by quiet beeps and soft breathing, he realized grief had only been waiting, patient and undefeated. Near dawn, Maya stirred, her eyes fluttering open, confusion clouding her gaze, and Sarah jolted awake instantly, leaning forward with a whispered cry, Maya. Adrian watched as recognition dawned, a weak smile spreading across Maya's lips. You came back, she murmured. Always, Sarah replied, tears falling freely now. Adrian turned away briefly, unable to witness the moment without breaking. When he looked back, Maya's gaze had shifted to him, curious and unafraid. Are you the man from the picture? She asked softly. Adrian froze. What picture? Maya lifted her hand slightly. The smiling girl, she said. She looks like me. The room seemed to tilt, and Adrian felt his carefully rebuilt world crack again. Yes, he said hoarsely. She was my daughter. Maya studied him with solemn intensity, then nodded as if confirming something she had already known. Then you're sad, she said simply. Adrian swallowed hard. Yes. She smiled faintly. You can stay, she offered. In that small permission, Adrian felt something mend, fragile but real. As morning light crept through the blinds, illuminating a future he could not yet see clearly, Adrian made a decision that would ripple far beyond this room, beyond these walls, into corners of the city he had long ignored. This was no longer about charity or guilt. It was about responsibility, about confronting a truth that would soon shatter him completely. And as he sat there, watching two sisters cling to life in each other, he knew the path ahead would not be easy, but he also knew he would follow it, no matter where it led. If this chapter touched your heart, subscribe now, because the next chapter reveals a secret buried deep in the city that will break Adrian in ways money never could. Morning arrived without warmth, filtered through gray clouds that pressed low against the hospital windows as if the sky itself were reluctant to witness what was about to unfold. And Adrian Cross stood beside Maya's bed, listening to the steady rhythm of machines that now felt like fragile guardians, each beep a reminder that life, once lost, could never truly be reclaimed, only protected for as long as fate allowed. Sarah slept curled in the chair again, exhaustion finally overpowering vigilance, her face softer in rest yet etched with shadows no child should carry. And Adrian found himself watching them both with a strange mixture of fear and resolve, knowing that whatever came next would demand more than money, more than influence, more than carefully worded press statements. When the social worker arrived, her clipboard hugged to her chest like armor, Adrian braced himself, but to his surprise she did not look skeptical or cold, only tired. A woman who had seen too many children slip through cracks no one wanted to admit existed. She asked questions gently, listened intently as Sarah spoke in halting sentences about nights underground, about running when shelters were full, about learning which corners were safe and which could get you killed. And with every word Adrian felt the walls of his insulated world crumble further. The social worker nodded slowly, then turned to Adrian. There's a place, she said carefully. An old transit hub beneath the city. We know about it, but it's complicated. Adrian's jaw tightened. That's where they were, he said. I saw it. She hesitated, then met his eyes. Then you should know, she replied. It's not just homeless families. It's a network. Abandoned children, people who disappear. The words lodged in his chest like splinters. and he understood instantly that this was bigger than two sisters, bigger than one night of rain and regret. Later that afternoon, after ensuring Maya was stable and arranging for private care that made the nurses exchange quiet glances, Adrian returned to the underground entrance with Sarah walking beside him, her steps uncertain but determined. "You don't have to come," he told her, though he already knew she would. "I have to," she replied simply. The descent felt heavier in daylight, the darkness no less oppressive, and as they passed familiar tunnels, faces emerged from shadows, men, women, children, eyes following Adrian with suspicion, curiosity, and something dangerously close to hope. Sarah guided him wordlessly, turning left, then right, until they reached a section he hadn't seen before, deeper, colder, the air thick with despair. Here the shelters were more permanent, built from scavenged doors and metal sheets, and here the silence felt intentional, as if sound itself had learned to be afraid. "This is where they bring the new ones," Sarah whispered. Adrian's pulse thundered. "Who?" She swallowed. "The men who promise food, beds, work." Rage flared through Adrian so hot it made him dizzy, and he forced himself to breathe to see rather than react. A woman approached them cautiously, her face lined beyond her years, a child clinging to her leg. Sarah nodded at her. "It's okay," she said. "He helped Maya." The woman's gaze flicked to Adrian, then softened slightly. "Help is rare," she said, "but danger is not." She led them to a makeshift room hidden behind a collapsed wall where faded drawings covered the concrete. Crayon suns, stick figures holding hands, words spelled wrong but heavy, with meaning home, safe, please. Adrian felt his throat close as he recognized the universal language of children asking for what adults had failed to give. "They used to teach us here," Sarah said quietly, "before the bad ones came." "Who taught you?" Adrian asked. Sarah hesitated, then pointed to a corner where a small shrine stood candle, burned low around a photograph of a smiling woman holding two children. Adrian's breath hitched as he looked closer. The woman in the photograph was Elena, his wife, Lily's mother. The world tilted violently. "That's not possible," he whispered, yet the evidence burned before him. The woman from the photograph, the woman who had left him years ago, broken by grief, searching for meaning, had been here, beneath the city, teaching forgotten children how to read, how to hope. Memories flooded back with cruel clarity, Elena talking about volunteering, about feeling useless in a world of excess, about wanting to help the ones nobody sees. He had dismissed it then, too consumed by deals and deadlines to notice her quiet desperation. "She was kind," Sarah said softly. "She said every child mattered, even the invisible ones." Adrian dropped to his knees, the concrete unforgiving, his mind shattering under the weight of realization. Elena hadn't abandoned him. She had chosen a path he had been too blind to follow. "Where is she now?" he asked, his voice barely a sound. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She tried to stop them, she whispered. "The men who take kids." One night, she didn't come back. The place seemed to close in around him, walls echoing with unspoken guilt, and Adrian felt a pain deeper than loss, a pain born of knowing he could have been there, could have helped, could have listened. He stood slowly, anger replacing despair with cold clarity. "How many children are here?" he asked. Sarah shrugged helplessly. "Too many." Adrian's phone buzzed in his pocket, a reminder of the world above, of power he had wielded for profit and prestige, and for the first time he understood its true purpose.